We should make you like the moderator or something. You're always early, not even on time early. Lori is like the mistress of ceremony. Um, good to see everybody. Happy Thursday. I am super excited to hold on one second. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Um, I'm always excited to see everybody. I'm always excited to see everybody in the room, everybody come in and just building on your expertise. Um, one quick comment about the um, I guess the motivational video that Minnie showed before we got started. Can I tell you guys, I'm not sure what your systems are for your day to day, but if you can take maybe just 5 minutes, 7, 10, sufficient. If you can put more in there, that'd be great. But if you can just take the time to give yourself a moment to meditate on your goals, right? Meditate on your goals. Um, of course, to see yourself, there's a book that I'm reading right now, and I want to share it with the group, but I want to figure out a systematic way to share with the group without the whole book club situation. Because it'd be great if you read it, but many people have their days, they have enough on their plate. So I don't want to drop a book in your lap. But there's a book called Be Your Future Self Now. Be Your Future Self Now that I'm reading. And the entire idea, the concept of the book, Be Your Future Self Now, is whatever you envision for your future self, start doing those things now. Be that person now. What does that person dress like? Start dressing like that person now. Where does that person go? For for dinner, gym, school, entertainment. Um, Start doing that now, right? What do they read? Read that now, right? Start incorporating that into your now, right? And all of a sudden, you would have accomplished that future self. And so, again, the name of the book is Be Your Future Self Now. It's really nice. It's not a long read, big print, a lot of space. There's even some little graphics in there. So it's not a long read. So if any of you kind of read at night, or you have a moment where you read and you read personal development type books, I would recommend that book, Be Your Future Self Now by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. All right. Now, with that being said, I also want to add from the motivational clip for those of you that were on at that point where Arnold Schwarzenegger spoke about the reps, right? He had to get the reps in, 200 sit-ups, and he was excited to do those things that he knew would get him to where he needed to be, right? To his goal to being Mr. Universe. And he became, as he said, the youngest Mr. Universe in history, which I didn't know, but now just learning. But so the last concept I want to point out or put a pin in from that motivational clip is the reason why I want you all to, or I remind you to view those types of videos is because it will give you insight into the truth that nothing comes easy. One of my mentors, when I first got into the corporate space, he would say, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it. And so there are some things that you aspire to do. Not everyone is doing it because it's not easy. However, just because it's not easy does not mean that it cannot be accomplished.
Right.
It simply means that you have to be clear on the steps that it takes to accomplish that and then be committed to it. Right? So that's my little soapbox. And then that still ties us into our discussion today. That still ties us into our discussion today. And so, if you are with us today and this topic, obviously, I would assume your goal is to have a smooth closing experience, right? A smooth closing experience. Jiminy, go ahead and drop in the chat our handout for today. All right, our handout link for today. And remember, like we spoke about last week, we are, yes, be your future self now. Thank you, Lori. Let me see if he's in here. Yeah, I was just talking about that with my husband. My son started an internship on Monday, and I think he said something about be on time. I said, no, on time is late and early is on time, right? Early is on time is late. I'm gonna say that one more time because as real estate professionals, we need to make sure project it till you make it. I like that. Oh, there he is before you let him in. Never mind, he just came in, so I'm not gonna say it again. All right, so with that being said, Lori, don't laugh. Act like you didn't hear that. He just popped in the room. Um, with that being said, today's topic, see you at the closing. Hey, Chandra from Fort Lauderdale. See you at the closing table, closing timeline and task management. So this is session two of our four-part session where we are looking at the managing a closing process from contract to close, right? So that we can have a smooth closing. Now, one of the things that I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to do like you did last week. As we move through this, if you're a new realtor and you may not have had the closing experience before, or you kind of just stumbled your way through it and you really didn't know, you know, you really didn't know the way, you kind of was just nudged in a direction. Feel free to ask questions as we go through this. Again, as by the time we complete this 4-week review, you will have a full checklist of what you should be looking for, at least a baseline. And then you'll add to that some of the things that you want to do on your deals to customize your client's experience, right? So you can always do that as well. All right. Again, make sure as you're coming in that you are accessing the handout. If for some reason you can't access the handout, give Minnie a quick shout, message her directly. All right. I'm just moving this around. All right. All right. Ooh. And then for those of you how many of you, this is your first time joining us? If this is not your first time joining us, just let me know. No text notification, only email. Marcella, it's your first time? Text came late. Text came probably right at 12 o'clock, Nick. So I was watching that. Yeah, it came right at 12 o'clock. Andrea, your first time? Oh my gosh. I thought I saw you before. All right. Well, welcome, welcome. Happy Thursday, and welcome to for the rest of us. We're here every Thursday, Andrea Marcelli. We're here every Thursday. In conjunction, Purchase Ready Academy, in conjunction with the association, where we gather and we discuss some topic related to building your business, and more importantly, not just substantively, but systematically, right? And so we're learning a substance, we're learning a skill about the real estate business, but we're also learning how to systematically apply this to our business, because we know that systems are what allow you to scale, to do more business. Last week we talked about how without systems in place, you can probably do a couple deals well, but you can't do many. You can't do many deals. That's just what it is. When you look at I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I always bring up Amazon, one of my favorite companies, and the comment was made, and I'm glad we have some new folks so I can bring this to the table. The comment was made that at a high level, someone may see Amazon, for example, as a goods company, right? Because you purchase things from them. But if you look deeper, Amazon is a logistics company. They are a logistics company. What does that mean? They have perfected or perfecting. If you ask them, they're probably perfecting. They don't feel like they've perfected it yet. They are in the midst of perfecting how you deliver items to someone, right? So they are a logistics company. I'll use also, for example, Zappos, I think was the name of the company. Tony Shea. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name. He passed away. What are you trying to do? He said about his company, he said, we are a service company that happens to deliver shoes as our product or something like that, right? Like we're in the business of giving people great experience, but we just happen to do that via delivery of shoes because it's a shoe company. So my point is when you look at your business, depending upon how big you want your business to grow, or you may not even want it to be big. Maybe you want it to be a lifestyle business, and that's fine as well, right? You don't have to grow a mega team and do 1,000 transactions per year. You can be happy with, 5 per month, 10 per month. But what systems still do is they allow you to be very comfortable in the delivery of your business. And so that's what we're talking about each week. Again, we talk about some substantive area of your business, and then we layer on top of that. Now, how are we going to make sure that you not now that you know the substance of your business, how do you offer it in a systematic and organized way so that you continue to enjoy your business, right? And you're not running around with your hair on fire. So, with that being said, my name is Ray Cole, Marcelli Andrea. Those of you who this is your first time coming in the room, I'm a South Florida real estate attorney. Just moving this over. Got some folks popping in. A little bit about me personally. I am originally from Miami. I attended the University of Florida for undergrad, so I always say go Gators. Went on to law school at Santa Clara, came back home to Miami, got my LLM in real property development. I'm a proud licensed Florida real estate sales professional. I did get my first real estate license in California while in law school. Came back home and got my real estate license again right before taking the Florida bar exam. And I'm also a proud Florida licensed mortgage loan officer. So all things real estate is what we talk about here on Thursdays. All right. Again, for those of you who are just coming in the room, be sure to check the chat. There is a link to today's handout in the chat. Like we did last week, we're using today's handout as our slides, right? We don't want to make sure that we, instead of having slides in the handout, we're going to use the handout for as our presentation content for this month. Now, with that being said, last week, I'm going to do a quick recap. For those of you, again, you said this is your first Thursday. We were here last week. We're here every Thursday, but I'm going to do a quick recap. For those of you, this is your first day joining us, and lucky you, we've included in today's handout the content from last week as a recap, right? So as a reminder to those of you who were here last week and those of you coming in, last week we talked about essentially the first 3 days. The first 3 days, the first 72 hours. The first 72 hours of going under contract. And we talked about how much of it's a pretty substantial lift, right? Again, for those of you who have done this a couple of times, or if you've done this yourself, especially if you've done this yourself recently, that first 3 days of going under contract is a pretty substantial lift. There's a lot of tasks to complete, right? That includes, getting the file over to the closing agent, opening the file in your case, in your file management system or contract management system. That includes completing all the intake requests that are going to come from the closing agent. Of course, you're probably going to have some compliance requirements from your brokerage. So it's a pretty substantial lift, right? And so we also talked about once the contract is fully executed, we're confirming dates, right? Now it's time to set our deadlines, our task, right? Which are some of the things we're going to talk about today. Last week, we talked about setting the file up. What are some of the things that you need to do to set the file up to be sure that you are going to make sure that you have a smooth closing experience from contract to close? So last week was set up, and on the screen, we see some of the things that we discussed last week with regards to setup. Now, one of the other things you see on the screen is we color coded who's responsible for these items. Because one of the concepts that we discussed last week was, again, when we're talking about systems, we talked about leveraged. And we talked about how there are going to be a whole host of tasks that do not necessarily require the realtor to perform them. And so as you see here on the screen, there's some huge swaths. There's huge swaths of tasks that are completed by the transaction coordinator, right? And we just have a few once we're under contract that are with the realtor. Because again, I'm going to remind you guys, your highest and best use, your absolute highest and best use is getting more buyers under contract, more sellers on the market. That is your highest and best use. That is your highest and best use. Meaning That is the thing concerning your business that most others that work with you, they either cannot do as well as you, or they simply cannot do it because what? Maybe they're not licensed to do it, right? There are some licensed transaction coordinators, but many of them are going to make sure that they limit the services that they provide to you to those of a transaction coordinator. They're not going to start negotiating on your behalf, even though they can because they are licensed. They're not going to get up and leave and go show property, right? Some may, but many won't. But the point is that outside of that, for the even if they remain in their lane as a transaction coordinator, there are so many things that they take off of your plate. All right. So we started last week with that discussion. You see that on the screen, right? We talked about here's day two of the three. This is completely transaction coordinator, right? And then day three of three, we have more transaction coordinator. The realtor was conducting the property inspection, reviewing the reports, and then the realtor was negotiating repairs. Here again, highest and best use. Here are the things associated with this transaction that a transaction coordinator cannot do. They cannot negotiate repairs. They should not be negotiating on your behalf. Now, can you review the reports, what we call relay back to your transaction coordinator what you're requesting on behalf of the client for them to deliver that message? Sure. Sure, that can be done. But the determination as to what should be selected and what shouldn't be negotiated and what the amounts and all that back and forth, that should be driven by you because you are the licensed realtor. All right. And so again, this handout has color coded for you what you should be doing, either because you're the licensed realtor, you're the person that's best suited for that task. But where we can delegate it out to someone else, you see it notated there. All right. All right. So that was a quick recap for those of you again that you did not have a chance to join us last week. You have the handout which has the recap, and then there will be a link at the end of our training today to our YouTube page where that recording is also posted there. All right. Now, so today's discussion, session two, our topic is the timeline and task management. So we know that a successful closing is more than just deadlines, right? Last week we talked about making sure that you have your deadlines appropriately scheduled, that you have a system to track them. But now that we are what I would say in the thick of things, how are we ensuring that we not miss deadlines, right? How are we making sure that we are proactive, not reactive? And how are we making sure that we are communicating? Now, I can tell you guys, I'll use this example because I think it'll help you. It'll illustrate the concept. One thing I say about title on the closing team is like herding cats. You guys have seen cats. It's like herding cats, right? Trying to make sure that everyone is organized and in the same place and on the same track. It's like herding cats. All right. Now, all things being equal, what I want to suggest to you is assume that not necessarily that the person that is true. Now that I say it, you understand is you probably will have more patience for your partners. Now it is like herding cats because you have all these people all over the place, right? Let me give you another analogy. It's a little less like scattered. It's a little bit more powerful and like more. I use this one for the home buyer workshop. I don't say herding cats because that might make them anxious. Um, but with home buyer workshops, for those who I believe may have some type of familiarity with Power Rangers, once you go under contract, it's like the Power Rangers commercial. I'm sorry, cartoon, right? What happens with the Power Rangers cartoon? When they have a challenge, all this, like, well, maybe five or six of them, they running in the middle, they put their hands in, and it's 1, 2, 3, break, right? And everybody starts running and doing their thing. That's what happens when you go under contract. You have a lender, you have their team, which includes an appraiser, and the lender has a processor, right? I thought about that as while I was preparing. For those of you who don't have a transaction coordinator, the lender even has a processor. That's their form of a transaction coordinator. The closer has a closing coordinator. That's their form of a transaction coordinator, right? You too should have an assistant. That's your transaction coordinator. All right. So I thought about that. Just make sure. Um, Go ahead and drop the handout again in the chat, please, Minnie. All right. And so whereas the closing agent, of course, is going to be managing all these people and receiving all this information, you too should have a handle on what's going on with all those folks. All right. And so that's the purpose of you knowing where your deal is. So, all right. What are we doing in days session 2, days 4 through about 15? Now we're just checking the boxes. Now we're checking the boxes for title clearing, and if it's a finance transaction, which most are, clear to close, right? During session 2, we're walking through title clear, lender clear to close. All right? All right. So we're now in day 4. Let's assume we've onboarded, we've completed our intake sheets, we have made sure that the buyer has gotten their wire instructions, the wire has been sent. Now we're at the end of week 1, where one of the first things you want to do, and you're going to continue to do, we're going to make sure we send a status update. There should be a weekly status update going out to your customer. And guess what? It doesn't even hurt to send a status update to the lender and the title agent, because perhaps they're not as organized as you are, right? It doesn't hurt to send them a status update. Great. We have just want to confirm that you have, well, obviously you may be reaching out for the escrow letter if you have not received that yet, right? Intake is complete. Is there anything else that you need from us at this moment? They won't mind, right? But you want to send a week 1 status update at the very least to your customer, to the customer. Well, your transaction coordinator, not you. The transaction coordinator is going to send a week 1 status update confirming intake complete. You know, depending upon which side you're on. If you're representing the seller, you're looking for an escrow letter, making sure the escrow letter is going out, right? If you're representing the buyer, you got a way more initial task to complete, right? You're making sure the earnest money deposit has been sent. The next step, look, we're verifying that the loan application has been submitted and the lender has required documents for initial underwriting review. Making sure that the loan application is submitted. Of course, I'm going to assume that you're not working with any buyer that has not already been pre-approved, right? Meaning they've already submitted a loan application. They've already submitted at least preliminary docs that will allow them to be pre-approved. Now, because, of course, we teach a class on this, but every time I have an opportunity to quickly give you guys a high level, I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to give you a high level of a pre-approval so that you have working knowledge of how to ask questions about this concept. All right. So what is a pre-approval? Assuming the loan officer has thoroughly pre-approved and in fact pre-approved. Reason why I say in fact, because the pre-approval is just as good as the piece of paper that someone gave you, right? If the loan officer did not really run credit, if they did not really collect pay stubs, if they did not really collect bank statements to verify that the buyer has cash on hand, then providing you with the pre-approval letter is just really a setup for frustration later on in the transaction, right? But assuming that did not happen, here's what happened for your buyer to obtain a lender's pre-approval. The first concept I want you guys to know is what I always teach is IPAC, IPAC. IPAC stands for, it's an acronym for Income, Property, Assets, Credit. Income, property, assets, credit. When a lender fully qualifies or approves a borrower to purchase a home using financing from them, they have underwritten, meaning they have confirmed the buyer's income, They have confirmed that the property is adequate. That's when they're communicating with title for a title commitment survey, a lien search, estoppel, so on and so forth. Of course, homeowners insurance, appraisal, those sort of things. They have confirmed the buyer's assets, meaning they have sufficient cash on hand, right, for cash to close and to make payments. And they've confirmed credit. What happens with the pre-approval is that the lender has already looked at three of those four items. They've confirmed the borrower's income. They've received pay stubs. They've confirmed their assets. They've received bank statements. And of course, they've confirmed their credit. They've run credit. By the time your buyer, assuming they have a clean pre-approval, by the time they are under contract, guess what? Guess what the lender should really only be working on? Property. That's all they were missing. So how do we now underwrite property? Well, we now have a contract. We now have a contract on a property that we're going to underwrite the property by making sure that the closing agent can give us clear title, that we can get homeowners insurance, that it is appraised, right? That we have a survey, right? And so once you go into contract is with the lender, loan officer. You're saying, all right, do you have everything that you need to get this file into initial underwriting? Now, I'm gonna do one more asterisk. When you started working with that buyer, realtors, I want you to have already asked that lender, how far into the pre-approval process are you with this buyer? Are there what conditions are pending for an approval outside of going under contract? When you ask that question, they're gonna be, oh, you know a little something. What conditions are pending? Because they'll already know. They'll already know. If they've done a clean underwriting on that buyer, they'll already know. They'll say, well, they do need to get us a gift letter from such and such, because they've told the buyer already, well, you're a little short on assets, so you're gonna need a gift letter from someone for some cash to close, right? Now, the last point I want to make with regards to that, the reason why you want to have this thorough conversation with the lender is because if you have a very clean buyer, guess what you're able to do? You're able to make an offer to go to close within 2, 3 weeks. You don't need the full 30 days because the lender has underwritten this buyer so much that the only thing they were waiting for was a property. And they're ready to close just as soon as they can get what they need to clear title. Does that make sense? Yeah? All right, perfect. All right. So, with that being said, we're just right here on this point. When you verify with the lender that the property is now, that the entire application is now gone into underwriting, you're making sure, okay, how are we looking? What is our timing looking like, right? And they should be able to confirm that for you. Now, again, now we should be into week 2, 2-week status update. Right? We're waiting for lender clear to close, title clear. Of course, by this point, we're looking for homeowners insurance quotes, right? You want to make sure that you have, we always say at least three. Three is the number that you should make sure that you have available for your customer, for them to make a choice as to who they want to go with for their homeowners insurance. All right. The transaction coordinator is going to confirm that the appraisal has been ordered by the lender. Let me give you guys bring you behind the curtain with appraisal. They're going to send an invoice to the buyer for the buyer to pay the invoice for their appraisal to be ordered. Just in case that lender is not as organized as you are, we want to make sure that that invoice did not go out and all of a sudden the buyer got busy, lender got busy, days have passed, and oh my God, the invoice for the appraisal hasn't been paid, right? So we're following up to say, hey, we want to make sure that appraisal has been paid because remember, they're going to need time to go out and examine the property, to analyze the property, conduct their appraisal, and then get the report finished. So when you think about it, this entire contract close process, guys, again, just same way our title is, it's just about managing times, deadlines. Did we get it done? Follow up, follow up, follow up, update, 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 right? Then second escrow deposit, if your contract calls for it, you want to make sure that's been made. Most of the contracts I see, they're generally about 10 days um, after the initial deposit or from the effective date. Sorry, make sure from the effective date, 10 days from the effective date, not 10 days from the first deposit. That's one of the concepts that I teach on in the class. Make sure that you understand that that second escrow deposit, unless you specifically write in that is from counting from the first escrow deposit, that date in the second escrow deposit section of the contract is counting from the effective date of the contract. If you don't know the effective date of the contract, that's a concept that you don't know. Make sure you jump into onto the YouTube channel and review the class on something about time. Many of you could find it while we're on the class, you could drop it in the chat because that's very important. That's a concept that in order for these 4 weeks to make sense for you to execute well, you have to know what your effective date is. You have to know how to measure the contract effective date or determine the contract effective date so that you can measure your deadlines from there. All right. By week, definitely during week one, definitely by week two, you should be looking for a draft settlement statement. We had this requesting a draft settlement statement at day 3. We had this in last week because at that point you're making sure that what your any cost, any commissions, any amounts that you already know should be included on that settlement statement are there. Your commission and who's paying the commission, right? If there's a transaction fee and who's paying the transaction fee. Is there a seller credit? Make sure that seller credit is on the settlement statement. Another pivot, if you do not know how to review settlement statements, there's a training on how to review settlement statements on the YouTube channel. All right. And if you're in the school community, of course, it's posted in there as well. By week 2, you are also now starting to receive the title commitment from the closing agent. All right. You want to make sure you receive that. You want to, as a transaction coordinator, your transaction coordinator should be familiar with what these documents are, right? They should be familiar with what a title commitment is, what a lien search is, what an estoppel is, what a survey is, and what to look for. Not because they are clearing these matters, but they understand what they stand for, right? And the information that they provide. So with regards to the title commitment, I do recommend that you as the realtor take a look at it, but your transaction coordinator should definitely take a look at it just because you should see what the closing agent is going to be clearing, right? Because you can see a title commitment if you've done this enough times and you see a lot of requirements, you're like, oof, there's a lot on this one. Or you can see one that just has almost nothing on it, right? So just take a look at it. Receive and review the lien search. Now, this is important for you because many of you, probably if you represent the buyer, you're probably going to have that language in there that says that the seller, sorry, will be responsible for closing out all unresolved permits, unrecorded code violations prior to closing at the seller's expense. Everybody seen that language before? If you've seen that language before, this is where you enforce that with the lien search. The lien search is going to let you know whether or not there's any unresolved permits, any unrecorded code violations. The lien search. All right. Quick reminder, difference between the lien search and the title commitment. The closing agent is only required to clear what's on the title commitment. They're not required to clear what's on the lien search. The lien search for a closing agent outside of the utility bill, it's for information purposes only. It's ordered for the parties because you generally have that language in your contract regarding open permits. To make it even further, even more clear for you, an open permit, an unrecorded code violation on the lien search is not a title issue that would prevent title from closing. The title agent is going to issue title insurance policy based upon the title commitment. Now, it will prevent them from closing, however, if you have the language in your contract that, again, seller will be responsible for resolving all unresolved permits, unrecorded code violations prior to closing at seller's expense. What's up, Jocelyn?
Yes, would the lender still close on it if the lien, they come back and lien search as a lien on the property, but the lender still close on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let me say this. They can, yes, if they understand that. Um, I've had lenders that get very involved with a permit showing on the property. However, those that understand, and that could be their requirement. But if the lender says, well, we're going to defer to title because they're the ones that are protecting us as it relates to the property. And if they don't have an issue with it, we don't have an issue with it, then that's going to be most of their positions because most of them they don't get the lien search. The lien search doesn't go to the lender. What goes to the lender is the title commitment and the survey. They don't even ask for the estoppel.
Thank you.
Very good question. Very good question. All right, we're into day 11 through 15. What is the next thing we're doing? We're in week three. Send that week three status update every week. Have a cadence. Have a cadence of status updates out to your customer. All right. Um, at this point, if there were any repairs to be made as a result of the initial inspection, you should be having your inspector go out and perform a walkthrough to confirm repairs were completed. Now, we had a conversation about this yesterday. Make sure to notate that this is for the inspector to complete because guess what? You're not an inspector. And in your purchase and sale contract is clear language that absolves you of a lot of responsibilities that other professionals are responsible for, right? You're the realtor. Your responsibility was to find them a property. As it relates to the square footage, the condition of the property, none of that legal matters, taxes, FERPTA, none of that falls within the purview of your services. The purchase and sale contract is clear. Your buyer brokerage agreement is clear on that. Your listing agreement is clear on that. So with that being said, let's keep that thread going. And as it relates to property condition, let the professionals do it. All right. So again, at this point, the inspector is going back out to confirm repairs are completed. If there is a association, you're checking the status of the transaction coordinator is checking the status of association approval. This is a big one. Everything is big, right, Cole? And it's like you keep saying stuff. Well, I'm pointing out things that become issues very often at closing. Guys, particularly, we already know that the buyers should have initiated their association approval application during week one. Week one. Now, also during that time, it would be best for you to confirm what is the standard processing protocol for association approval. Guys, even today in 2025, there are still associations that meet every third Monday from 1 to 1:15. There's a file in the office right now. Be honest with you. Very random times. Very random times. And so you want to know that in advance so that you can get ahead of ensuring that you don't have association approval issues later, right before it's time for you to close. Like we're still waiting for association approval. What happened? What happened? And they say, well, we don't meet again until 2 weeks from now, between 1 and 1:15, and we already have 3 appointments. So not sure if you're gonna make that schedule either. Ah, I've seen it. I've seen it, right? So make sure you're following up for the association approval status. Checking in with the lender as well. Week three. All right, lender. Okay. Do we have what we need to clear any pending conditions? Because again, you're organized, everyone else may not be, right? And maybe they might need you. They might say, oh my God, Della, thank you so much. I've been asking Minnie for her last check stub for 2 weeks. And Della's going to say, 2 weeks? Why didn't you tell me? And of course, Della gets her transaction coordinator on the phone to immediately get the pay stub to the lender. I wish I had this. I don't have it committed to memory. I wish I had it printed out. But I have this little like poem that's in our HR manual for the office. And the poem says something along the lines of somebody, anybody, everybody, nobody. It's a poem about things not being done. And it said, somebody, it's pretty long, but it says something along the lines of somebody knew that something needed to be done. And it was something that anybody could have done. And it ended up that nobody got it done, right? Because everyone was waiting on someone else to get it done. It's something along those lines. It's in our HR manual because what it's saying is at this point it is everybody's job. It is everybody's job, right? And it says anybody could have done it. Somebody knew to do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it because everybody thought the other person. I said it right. Do you know? Yeah. Matter of fact, I'm gonna make sure I have it for next week. Minnie, remind me. I'm gonna include that poem in the handout for next week. You guys will put it in your operations manual, right? So unless you're just being egregious and overly aggressive, trust me, everyone in the transaction will be grateful that you are professional, you're organized, and you have someone in your team that's just wanting to make sure that everybody is on the same page, right? All right. All right. By this time, you're also going to be receiving the property survey. We're in day 15, week 3, right? Now, finally, latter end of the midpoint process, transaction coordinator. Going to put that on the fridge for your kids. It's powerful. It is powerful. I'm going to make sure you guys are going to love it. You're going to love it when you see me like, ah, it's powerful. Um, Look at this, guys. Look at this screen. All transaction coordinator, one realtor task. Look at this screen. All transaction coordinator, one inspector task. I'm just making my case. All right. TC is going to reach out to confirm homeowners issue. And then last thing I'm going to add on this, all this time while all of this is being done, what are you doing? You're going to get more business. While this is being done, you're going to get more business. You're out marketing, prospecting, right? Getting more business. All right. By this point, TC should be confirming that the homeowner's insurance is bound. TC is reaching out to the closing agent to request. There it is. Who went and found that? Who went and found that? Candace, of course, Candace. I'm gonna go ahead and read it because you put it, Candace. It's in the chat, guys. Everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Oh my gosh. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. That's nice, huh? You're welcome. All right. Um, yeah. As you guys if you build your teams, build it on that, and all I think I'm telling you, it's like everybody gets it. All right. Just walk over, don't just walk over anything. All right. Monitor loan approval deadline. We know that's a hot spot. Monitor loan approval deadline. Monitor loan approval deadline. Okay, why are we saying that? It's going back to our contract. We're going back to our contract because we know that by the time we get to the loan approval deadline, we got a decision to make, right? we need to deliver written loan approval to the seller on or before loan approval deadline, right? This checklist is tying into our contract. By loan approval deadline, we know that the contract says that we need to deliver to the seller in writing the status of our loan approval, whether we've been approved and proceeding, obviously, whether we have been, we're not approved and we need to cancel, or we're not approved and we're requesting an extension of the loan approval deadline, or not approved, but my loan officer is Superman, so I'm gonna just roll the dice, right? If you guys taken the contract class before, this is all coming back to you. But know that this loan approval deadline, this for most transactions, particularly a finance transaction, this is the point of no return. Meaning this is the point of no return concerning that buyer's escrow deposit. Meaning that if we go past this date and the buyer is ultimately not approved for that loan and they cannot close, their escrow deposit is at risk of being retained by the seller. Now, of course, the seller can be gracious and let them out, or there's just so many other different, possible resolutions. But note that resolution number one is escrow deposit is retained, right? And of course, there's steps to getting it released to the seller and all of that, but that's just not a conversation we want to have, right? Right? So the we want to monitor that loan approval deadline. How do we monitor it? We say, okay, loan officer, we're coming up on the 19th. The 19th is our loan approval deadline. How are we looking for a conditional approval? Because that's what they're going to get. They're not going to get most time, I mean, they could, but most times by that point, they're going to get just a conditional approval, meaning that there are just some minor conditions remaining, meaning you still have your job, right? You still have the $50,000 that you showed us in your savings account and your credit score hasn't dropped, right? That's the ideal situation. Now, some loan officers get to this point and they have a couple more things with a little bit more hair on it, but that's not preferred. By the time you get to this point, you should be, again, the small things that every transaction has, right? And of course, again, you want to deliver written loan approval. Can the seller go off the more than deposit? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Now, in your contract, in the remedy section, there is an opportunity to accept the escrow deposit as what we call liquidated damages, or you can sue and get above that, right? Liquidated damages means I'm just going to accept this as the representation of what of my damages. My damages probably were more, right? But we'll just settle on this versus a seller saying, this little $2,000 you put in escrow, I forewent five different offers, or they would have to be able to show actual damages, right? In order to recover a number. But where they can show actual damages, yeah, they can recover more than the escrow deposit. All right. The one item that I have on here that is the realtor's responsibility, and of course, the transaction coordinator is driving this, but the reason why I pretty much double dip this, confirmed written loan approval delivered to seller on or before loan approval deadline, I have it here for both the transaction coordinator and the realtor. I double dip this because if just by chance, this is too important, that just by chance the TC misses it, realtor, they're talking to you. They're not talking to the transaction coordinator. All right. So for those items that are crucial to the transaction from a liability and professionalism standpoint, you're on here and there's a task for you. Right. Again, this is a very small thing. The only thing you need to be is CC'd on this, right? Just CC'd on the email. But again, this is double dipped because we know that there are some consequences of not meeting this task, right? From there, we're going to make sure the TC is going to monitor the clear to close, right? Conditional loan approval is different from clear to close. Those are not the same. Clear to close is we've checked all boxes and we're ready to close. Clear to close means we've checked all boxes and we're ready to close. We've confirmed that you're still employed, you still have the 50 grand, your credit score hasn't dropped, right? That's a clear to close. Now, one of the other things I placed in the comments here, monitor lender clear to close deadline confirm lender prepared to issue clear to close within 2 business days prior to the scheduled closing date. As a reminder, when we've done the trainings on the closing process, the anatomy of a transaction, when we've done any trainings talking about this contract to close process, I remind you guys that the lender's clear to close is just one domino. It's just one task in a whole host of tasks that need to be completed before we get to the closing table, right? And so for that reason, it's not oh, we get a clear to close at 9 a.m. and then you show up at the closing table at 2. Has that happened? Sure. That is the very least ideal situation ever. I'm going to say that again. To get a clear to close the day of closing is the absolute least ideal situation ever. What spreadsheet, Sabrina? Message many. Because I'm not sure what spreadsheet. You want to clear to close 2 business days before because there are so many things to be done to get to closing, including but not limited to. Remember, I tell you guys about a gap search. We talked about the title commitment. Title commitment is run when the file comes into the office. Prior to closing, the closing agent needs to run a gap search to confirm that nothing has been recorded against that property from the time that first title commitment was run up until closing. That's a gap search. That can take 24 hours to come back from the underwriter. Oh, and by the way, if something pops up on that gap search, it has to be resolved. Let's use our example. We talked about an inspector. There are situations where the parties have agreed for work to be done on a roof. Guess what happens when work is done on a roof? A notice of commencement is recorded against the property and it has to be released. That's going to come up on the gap search and you're not closing, right? When you want to know that, well advance of the day before closing or day of closing, right? So this is why you can't wait until the last minute. Also, the closing agent still needs to match and balance with the lender. We're going to talk about this session 2, but since we're on it, they're going to need to match and balance. They're going to need to get that figure to your buyer. Your buyer's going to need to make it to their banking institution to wire that amount to the closing agent's account. God forbid they use a banking institution that their wires do not hit immediately. I've had situations where I've waited days, especially if your buyer's using a credit union or they use like an online banking institution like a Amex, a Discover, um, those types of online institutions, those wires don't process immediately, right? So you want to make sure you have enough time for that. Right? So that's your goal. Clear to close 2 business days prior to your scheduled closing date. Um, at this point, you're also asking for an updated settlement statement. Again, let's make sure that we're tracking that your figures haven't dropped off somehow, right? And all anything that should have been added, maybe there was a credit that should have been added for the result of the inspection, right? You want to make sure that's there. And then lastly, we're sending out another status update. All right. That was a lot. Let me answer this question really quickly and then we can answer other question. My seller was asking me if using our title company is cheaper than using her lawyer. Well, first of all, Sophia, if you want my I'm laughing because I don't compete on price. I compete on service. That's first of all. I do not chase people to the bottom on their pricing. I do not. I do not chase. We do not. You should not chase anyone to the bottom on prices. Do not compete to be the cheapest. And the only way to know, honestly, is to get that attorney's fee, and then to get Sophia laughing, and then to find out our fee. Our settlement fee is $7.95. So that's the answer. Our settlement fee is $7.95. Other fees are pass-throughs. If the attorney charges more than that, then they're more expensive. If they don't, then we have a more value added. Again, I will gift you guys that line. You don't compete on price, you compete on service, right? And service levels cost, right? All right. Who provides the settlement statement, the lender or the title agent? Very good question, Candace. The title agent. The title agent provides the final settlement statement. Now that is in collaboration with the lender. The lender sends over their closing disclosure settlement statement. They're going to call it a closing disclosure. They send over their closing disclosure that has all their figures. Once the closing agent receives the lender's closing disclosure, take those figures, drop them into our settlement services software, and we that's what we call matching and balancing, where we confirm that their figures match our figures. Well, their figures taken together with ours match to a buyer's cash to close. That's what we're doing when we're matching and balancing, right? So we're taking their figures, we're putting them in our settlement software along with our figures, and we're saying this is our bottom line. Let's We need to keep matching to our bottom line, to our cash to close match, right? Our cash to close. Both of us should have, and when they get ours, they're going to put our figures in their system. And everybody's putting each other's figures in their systems until our cash to close matches, right? So it may be like, why is we're off by $50. Oh, my prepaid should be this, that, da, da, da. Like that's what that looks like. All right. Very good question. All right. All right. Pro tip. As we wrap up, your transaction coordinator should use a transaction management software or track task and provide visibility into deadlines, right? What we call working, we should be all working on the same page, right? I should be able to see what my deadlines are. You should be able to see what our deadlines are, and we have visibility. This keeps everyone accountable and builds trust with the clients. The clients, um, most transaction coordinators, even when the transaction first is open, there's going to be a one pager with all of our major deadlines that we need to hit. And as they change, they might change based upon, as the transaction progresses. But let's be organized, right? By mastering timeline and task management, you'll stay in control of the closing process and deliver a seamless experience from start to finish. All right. All right. All right. For those of you who we had not had an opportunity to work before, Sophia, there's our information. We close all of Florida. For those like, where's your office located? We have various offices throughout the state of Florida, but we service all of Florida. All right. All right. For those of you who have not had an opportunity to join the community, there's a link to join the community on the handout, and the link to, oh, and Minnie has dropped in the chat. And then the link to YouTube is also um, on the handout. I think these are live. Are these live? I don't know if it's live. Looks like the link is not live. There you go. Mastering contract timelines. Thank you, Richard. Good to see you. Good to see you. Lastly, for those of you who have not already, Minnie, cost of entry. Give us a Google review, please. A Google review. If you found value in today's discussion, we would appreciate a 5-star Google review on our new Purchase Ready Google My Business page. All right. All right. All right, Andrea Marcelli. Did I say that right? Marcelli, nice to meet you. Hey, Mai, you're welcome. Hope to see you next week. Again, we're here every Thursday. Next week, session 3. We're getting close. We're getting close. Hey, Helen. Have a good day, everybody. If you give me 10 stars, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, sir. Is there a form in the MLS to evict a tenant? I highly doubt that. Gotta go to court. Can the agent evict the tenant without going to court? No, 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 no. That's a good question. No, no, no. I mean, if they move out, yeah, but to enforce it, you would have to file an action, right? So you can send notice. That's a good question. So you send notice, hey, Dr. Jones, you can send notice, and if they don't move out per your notice, then you have to file an action with the court. Thanks, Natalie. All right, Chandra from Fort Lauderdale. You got a guy named Bruno. That's called self-help. You don't want that. And then the tenant gets triple damages. Try me. I've got some money on that one. That's called self-help. We can't do that. Jessica Ree Morgan, good to see you. Look at all these faces. Good to see you. All right, Minnie. Thank you. And stop the recording. Was there a list for days 1 and 4? Yes, Richard. Thanks, Lord. There was. It's actually at the beginning of this handout in the recap section. Is days 1 through 4. And then the recording for days 1 through 4 is either in the community or on YouTube. All right. All right, guys. We did it. See y'all next week.